Good morning. First, it's official. The nightmare on the hijacked Italian cruise ship is over. It's now been confirmed by Egypt's foreign minister that the hijackers have surrendered. There only were 4 of them. More than 400 hostages are free and unharmed. And apparently the deal is that the 4 hijackers who wanted to free 50 terrorists from Israeli jails have been given a safe conduct out of the country. So the ship, the Achilles Lauro, is now sitting in Portside Harbour, and it's expected that the refugees will start to come off within the next hour or so. No one was killed or injured, neither Americans nor anybody else. The nightmare is over. But it leads you to think of other nightmares. One of these days, some terrorist will get hold of a nuclear bomb, and who knows what might or might not happen. Which makes it very topical this morning that we're going to go to the subject in part of the Rainbow Warrior in New Zealand, where the French agents blew up that ship of the Greenpeace's and killed 1 photographer. And in the studio this morning, I have 2 experts from the South Pacific. Owen Wilkes, who is a peace activist, part of the operation of Nuclear Free Pacific. And Roman Bedor, a lawyer from Belau, which is a U.S. trust territory, the other side of the Philippines, where they too are very concerned. And the whole business of New Zealand's incredible actions by the Premier David Lang, apart from the Rainbow Warrior, the fact that little New Zealand has stood up among all the Western nations and said to the Americans, no nuclear weapons in our country. And that's why the Americans are pretty hostile in some ways to the New Zealand government today. Now, apart from that, this morning we're going to touch a local story which is going to be perhaps sad for all you baseball fans. Everybody, even we, now love the Toronto Blue Jays. Everybody here has been convinced that we built the stadium partly to get big league baseball. But yesterday, Peter Uberau, the commissioner, laid down a new set of rules as to who is liable to get a baseball franchise. And it's going to be much tougher under these rules than it was before. But to tell us about that, and to be optimistic probably, we have Jack Beach, president of Molson Breweries, who is vice president of the Canadians and one of the great pushers for big league baseball here, and Harry Renaud, vice president of BC Place and the stadium general manager. Oh, and yeah, before I forget, I finally got round to interviewing Sophia Loren yesterday. It was kind of ho-hum, to tell you the truth. I was a bit disappointed, but having told you it was going to be on this morning, whether I like it or not, it has to be on this morning. Wouldn't talk very much, but I asked her about her double love affair with Cary Grant and Carlo Ponti. Can I mention Carlo Ponti and Cary Grant?
What's the connection?
Well, it's a fascinating story which women follow, how you were in the dilemma of which man you'd marry.
I was 22 years old, and Cary had always been my favorite actor since I was a little girl in Pozzuoli, you know. And when I made the first film with him, I was really fascinated by his personality. And so at a certain moment, I really thought that I was in love. But then when you have to make a choice in life, a serious one, not just
casual.
Yeah. I think you always come up, with the right choice.
That'll be towards the end of the program. Back with the Nuclear Free Pacific campaigners after the break. Most of the governments of the Western world accept nuclear weapons and the nuclear deterrent or the nuclear preemptive capacity as a fact of life today. Many protesters there are about it. But what I want to ask, first of all, I want to introduce Owen Wilkes, who was actually up here a long time ago testifying as an expert witness in the Bangor occupation down at the Trident base.
Yep, right.
He didn't
Yep.
get arrested at the time.
No. I wasn't at Bangor. I was just testifying at the trial, you know, on the very good reasons there were for protesting.
And for breaking the law.
Right, yeah.
Now, Roman Bedor, you're a lawyer from Below. Give me a small history lesson of Below, very small. I'd never heard of it before.
Palau is one of the Pacific islands that is in the northern part of the Pacific that is about 500 miles east of the Philippines, and it is included in the group of islands called the Micronesian Islands, or the Trust Territory of the Pacific.
And you too, because of wartime experiences, are determined to stop, if you can, the French atmospheric nuclear tests.
And the American test in the Pacific as well.
They're not doing atmospheric tests at the moment, are they?
Not. The Americans are not doing it at the moment, but they're conducting a missile test in the Pacific.
Now, you explain to me, you're a Kiwi. How come New Zealand has the guts enough to say, keep your nuclear weapons out of our ports, and then when the Navy comes over here, it's hands off from the Americans?
Well, I don't know whether it's guts. I think it's just determination and persistence. You know, we first got into this sort of thing with the French nuclear testing in the Pacific. We got very offended by that. After the other nuclear powers had stopped testing in the atmosphere, there was France still letting off its bombs in the atmosphere, and there's all this nuclear pollution coming down. But then what really got it going was in 1976, the New Zealand government and people decided that we would not have nuclear power in New Zealand. We didn't need it, we had plenty of hydropower. And yet, just as we were making that decision, the United States Navy said it wanted to start sending nuclear-powered warships into our ports. So we decided we didn't need nuclear power, we weren't going to have it. They were saying it was going to come right into the middle of our cities. So that started off a campaign, and you know, we just got stuck in. The logical thing to do seemed to be to try and actually stop these boats, so we organised squadrons of small boats that attempted to blockade the harbour.
All under Greenpeace?
Oh no, there's a multitude of organisations. Greenpeace was quite active there against the French tests, but there's a whole host of other organisations that all got stuck in.
But it was Lang. When did David Lang? He's a socialist, isn't he? Labour Party.
Labour Party.
Labour Party.
Right. Well, he's come in quite recently. That was only last year that Labour got elected.
Was he the guy who lowered the boom?
Yeah, he was, and he was just responding to what the public wanted, because by then public opinion polls were showing that at least 60% of the New Zealand population did not want nuclear warships or nuclear weapons coming into the country at all. So he had to more or less respond to that.
Now, you almost went on the Rainbow Warrior this time. What was the public reaction in New Zealand to the bombing by these French agents? There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, right, no. Although at the beginning that wasn't clear, and no one could really believe that the French government would be, and you know, we thought it was a bunch of extremists, and it was total shock, I think, because terrorism just never reached New Zealand before. This is the first time anything like this had happened. So I guess, you know, the whole country felt really strongly about it right from the start. New Zealand's a small enough place that if something like that happens in one town, everyone else throughout the country, feels threatened by it and concerned about it.
Let's go to Below. You have your own constitution, but you're not independent yet, are you?
We are not. We're more or less a quasi-independent in a sense that we have the self-government, but when it comes to international matter, the United States is still controlling them, and we are in a process now of working, for the full independence of the islands.
Now, all the Micronesian islands suffered, the Marshall Islands especially, did they not, from the war and the testing?
Yes, from the war, during the war, the whole Micronesian islands were used as a battlefield for the Japanese and the Americans, and after the war, the United States continued to use the Micronesian islands in the islands of the Marshall as a testing ground, where over 68 atomic bombs were being conducted in the Marshall Islands. And at the present time, United States used the islands for the missile test, where missiles are fired from Vandenberg Air Force Base in California into the
There are whole generations of youngsters who know nothing or perhaps have been told nothing about the nightmares caused by that testing. What kind of effect did it have on the inhabitants of the Micronesian? I'm talking about the post-war atmospheric testing.
The Marshall Islands, the effect of the radiation on the people has caused a lot of cancer to a lot of lives, leukemia and lot of deforms of the babies.
Deformities.
Yeah, deformities of the children.
You had babies you used to call jellyfish babies.
Yeah, well, that's the only way to describe it, because you put it on the table and it doesn't have any bones, but it sort of moves, and it's more or less like a jellyfish, and that's the only appropriate term that people would, because it comes from the human being and it's considered as a baby.
Oh dear. Don't want to say to that one except that it's merely a foretaste of what Holocaust might do, a tiny foretaste, eh?
Yep.
Right now, what's going to happen now in the Pacific? You're here to whip up what?
Well, to whip up a bit of Canadian enthusiasm for doing something about the Pacific. You know, the grouch we've got is that everybody knows about the nuclear weapons in Europe and all that sort of thing, you know, cruise missiles and all that sort of thing, and what the Greenham Common women are demonstrating against and so on. But very few people realise that exactly the same things are going on in the Pacific. You know, the very same cruise missile that's being put on land in Europe is being put on ships in the Pacific. So we're being nuclearised in the same way, and we want to draw a bit of attention to this and, you know, try and do something.
Do you
about
really
it.
think, though, that any protests can eventually push the West back from nuclear weapons? Surely it depends entirely on the same level of evil on the other side, or thoughtlessness.
Yep, sure. But you know, I don't think that's not a reason for giving up. I think we've made small amounts of progress in various places. I mean, we do have a treaty which makes the South Pacific a nuclear weapon-free zone at the present time. That was just signed in August of this year. Now, it's not a very good treaty.
Who signed that treaty?
Well, there's 8 small countries in the South Pacific have signed it.
Not Australia.
Yep, Australia has signed it.
It signed it, New Zealand, and
Yep.
6 other small
Right.
countries,
Yep.
including Belau.
Belau was not really a party to it because of the status that it's not really considered as an independent nation.
No, but you're in a kind of status of one of the old British colonies where the master still controls the external affairs.
That's true.
That's it. Now, you were involved, I'll ask you about that next. I'm going to talk to these 2 nuclear-free Pacific campaigners with the one major success in New Zealand, right? They're the leaders. And take your calls, too, after the break. To Owen Wilkes, who is for the nuclear-free Pacific. You've always been a kind of a spy, haven't you?
Well, no. Well, you can say I'm a spy for peace, I suppose. No, I've basically been working in the way any investigative journalist works. You know, looking at all the open sources that are available and picking out information which the officialdom would rather was not exposed.
A guy like you, where did you get your start? With the Stockholm Peace Institute?
Well, I'd been doing a lot of research and expose work in New Zealand before I eventually got invited over to Scandinavia, and I worked.
Where you were promptly arrested on charge of espionage.
Not promptly. That was after 4 years in Scandinavia. Yeah, it was a very interesting business. You know, I was. This Peace Research Institute was a government outfit. We were being paid by the Ministry of Education, and we had a project examining all the NATO and foreign military bases in Norway. And what had ended up was that we were being paid by one government department to expose things which another government department wanted to keep secret. We found that there was a totally secret network of electronic spy bases in Norway, and it was so secret that not even the Norwegian Parliament was told about it. And yet it wasn't really secret at all, because we found these bases listed in the ordinary telephone directory. You just looked up under Defence, and it said Defence Research Radio Station, and if you asked a public relations man in the military what was a Defence Research Radio Station, he said he didn't know. And so we went and looked at them, and we saw the characteristic antennas of an electronic spy base, and so we wrote a report about it, seeing this was all open information. You know, anyone can look up the telephone directory. But we got prosecuted for that, myself and a Norwegian.
Tell me, what about the electronic spy bases in the Pacific? Are they not secret? I mean, the Americans have presumably have got the whole of Micronesia covered with equipment.
Well, they have bases all over the Pacific, and in Micronesia, it's obviously that we know that they're there, you know, with the military base, and as far as we're concerned, it's not really secrets.
No. Well, now, what's your next step? You're going to be speaking at Thursday night at Langara College, Saturday at Nanoose Bay, or the testing, the submarine testing, torpedo testing area for the Americans, and Victoria at St Andrews Hall next Wednesday on October the 16th. Let's take some calls. Any calls? Go ahead to Messrs. Wilkes and Bedor.
Hello?
Yes.
I have a question for them regarding the bombing of the Rainbow Warrior.
Right?
At the time the bombing occurred, there were press reports that there was supposed to be a meeting scheduled for the blast time of all 7 captains aboard the Rainbow Warrior. So clearly the intention of whoever bombed it was to get rid of the entire command structure of the flotilla. Have your guests any comment on that?
Yeah, well, it's still not sure, of course, because it hasn't come up for trial, but it would seem very probable that this is what they're attempting to do. You know, if the French simply wanted to put the Rainbow Warrior out of action, they should have torpedoed it out in the middle of the ocean, because no one would have known what happened then, even if there were survivors. But the only reason you can think of that they did it while it was in port was because they wanted to do it was the 7 directors of Greenpeace International that were supposed to be on board that night.
Well, in any case, they missed them. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Go ahead, please.
Yes, regarding the nuclear testing area in the South Pacific, why is it that we only hear about the Greenpeace people protesting and not the other countries joining them in a flotilla kind of protest?
Well, that may just be the reportage, but I'm sure either Owen or Roman can tell us about the other protest groups.
Why don't the countries stand up with the Greenpeace people?
Yeah, well, I think they do. It's just that they do it in a different way. They do it in a much more diplomatic way. You know, most of these countries have made quite formal protests against the French testing.
Can we name the 8 countries?
Well, just about every country around the Pacific and the Latin American countries and so on. Well, every country in that part of the southern hemisphere. And of course, the New Zealand government did send a couple of warships to the French testing zone once to express their concern in 1973. France has been hauled before the World Court, and the judgment of the World Court went against them, so they promptly withdrew from the jurisdiction of the World Court.
But I notice it says here you work doing stuff for 300 peace groups in New Zealand.
Yep.
Eh?
Yep. Some of them are small, of course.
Yeah. How about the small islands? Are you the only active one?
No, I think all the islands in the Pacific have been campaigning for the nuclear-free Pacific, against the nuclear testing in the Pacific. But one thing that you do not hear in this country and in some other country is that when you have the government of United States running the government in the islands, they are our spokesperson. And so most of the time they represent us in the U.S. Congress, they represent us in the United Nations. And so things like this, you will never hear about it. You have heard that United States are talking about the Hiroshima bombs and Nagasaki bombs, but you have never learned in school that United States have conducted 68 atomic bombs in Micronesia in time of peace.
You mean they don't even tell them that in Micronesia?
The Micronesians know, but the Americans do not know.
68 bombs.
It's over 68 atomic bombs.
Well, you remember we used to accept these, maybe you don't, accept these as a kind of natural progression in the early days after the war. We were so wrong. Go ahead from Victoria.
Yes, good morning. I have a question for Mr. Wilkes, please.
Uh-huh.
The Canadian peace movement has been super careful about avoiding any connection with a political party. I wonder if Mr. Wilkes would please comment on the difference between Canada's approach and the one taken by the New Zealand anti-nuclear movement.
You mean the approach of the
political alliances?
Yeah, well, we've tried to keep out of political alliances and so on too, because I think once any peace movement gets into any kind of political alliance, it's likely to get used by the political group. So we've taken a lot of effort to try and keep completely non-aligned, both from our New Zealand political parties and from any association with, Soviet Union or China or anything like that.
Yeah, it's a smart move.
Well, I think so, yeah. We're putting the peace cause first and not allowing ourselves to be used by anyone else.
Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Jack. I just wanted to say I'm delighted the Rainbow Warrior was bombed. I'm sorry more people weren't killed. As far as I'm concerned, Greenpeace had to come in and got exactly what they deserved. For the last several years, Greenpeace has attempted to disrupt French nuclear test protests And it's about time, I think, that Greenpeace found out who the boss in the South Pacific is. The French Pacific test site is French territory. The French have a perfect right to test nuclear weapons there. They're going to continue to test them there. And if the anti-nuclear activists don't like it, they can go off in the woods and cry. There's nothing they can do about it, and they know it.
There's a friend for you.
Yeah, right. Well, I'd say...
No, that's not an uncommon attitude.
Yeah, well, I think it is a fairly uncommon attitude, actually. You know, as far
Furthermore, nuclear weapons are needed in that area more now than ever. The Soviet Union has never hidden their intention to acquire a blue water navy. They're rapidly expanding their Pacific fleet at the Vietnamese base of Cam Bay, and they have nuclear capability. I'm predicting within 10 years after New Zealand goes anti-nuclear, New Zealand will be conquered by the Soviet Union. The Soviets will simply threaten to destroy New Zealand with nuclear weapons, since all they need from New Zealand is the island, not its people, because of its strategic position.
Oh, I think you're pushing it a bit far now.
Will surrender or wouldn't go communist without firing a shot.
What do you say to him?
Well, no, I dispute just about everything he's said. You know, the one place that the French have possibly got a right to test their nuclear explosions is in France itself, and you know, we wouldn't be objecting too much if they did that. There's no way you can say that the French have got any right to be in French Polynesia. You know, that place should be
French Polynesia is French territory, and what they do with their territory is nobody else's business.
Well, okay, I gather you're not a supporter of any nuclear-free zones in the Pacific.
Not at all.
Thank you, sir. Wonder if he's just having you on. Even I don't think like that. Do another segment of calls with my friends from the South Pacific, Owen Wilkes and Roman Bedor, after the break. On the topic in Paris, the defense minister has said that the French will not delay their next nuclear test that's at Mururoa, and they're going to be underground ones, as well as maybe a test of a neutron bomb, he doesn't say that, will not delay them by a week, a day, or even an hour. Neutron, I thought that had been, they'd stopped. That's the bomb that kills people but doesn't blow down buildings.
That's right, yeah, and you know, there's tremendous protest about the United States developing it, so the United States has sort of shelved it for the time being, but the French are apparently still going ahead with that. They tested the trigger for it last year, and the leaks from France say that they'll be testing the whole bomb this time.
Now, in Mururoa, how far would that be from your place?
That's in the South Pacific, and we are located in the north. That would be approximately 2,000 miles from
2,000 miles from you. The neutron bomb gives you the willies, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That's got the same... What is a neutron bomb? Tell me.
Well, it's a bomb that doesn't have very much explosive force, but it puts out an awful lot of neutron radiation, which will penetrate buildings and everything, so that anybody within range gets irradiated and dies a few hours later.
But some of the buildings, not in the epicenter, will stay...
Right. Yeah, it doesn't harm the buildings.
Makes the place suitable for occupation after 25,000 years. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I think it's very good that we have such distinguished guests with us, and what I'd like to ask is if they could tell us a little bit about the Canadian connections to what's going on in their areas. I'm thinking about Canadian uranium and the Nanoose weapons base over on the island, and any others that they may be aware of.
Owen? Canadian participation in the Pacific at the moment.
Yeah, well, the Canadian participation is not a very big issue, but there is quite a bit, and we'd like to see Canadian people opposing it. There's the Canadian Navy participates in some of the US naval exercises around the Pacific.
We don't really have a Canadian
Navy. Yeah, well, you're still lending, you know, credibility and respectability to some very sort of aggressive and disruptive US Navy operations in the Pacific.
Go ahead, please.
How effective is it to sign these nuclear-free zone treaties amongst the countries? Does it mean anything, or is it just a paper transaction?
It means, it means a lot of things to the people who live in the region. As a matter of fact, some of the country who have come up with their constitution for the nuclear-free at this time are preventing any installment of the nuclear weapons in their islands.
So you recommend signing it if only from moral grounds?
Oh, yes, I think it's a bit stronger than moral grounds. It definitely gives you another lever that you can use to pressure the nuclear powers.
Go ahead, please.
Gentlemen.
Yes.
Your anti-nuclear campaigns are directed, are they not, only at the Western powers and tantamount to a demand of their unconditional surrender. And as
Okay,
such,
let's take that. Tantamount to demanding unconditional surrender to the Soviet Union. Now, what do you say to that stock question? Because, you know, the argument always was you can parade here, you can't parade there. You can protest here, you can't protest there. Leaves us defenseless.
Right, yep. Yep, well that's a very big problem. It's much harder to tackle the Soviet Union on this one, you know, because it's a closed society and all that sort of thing. You know, Greenpeace has thought about it, but the only Soviet nuclear test zone that you can get anywhere near is Novaya Zemlya, and that's way up in the Arctic, and there's no way you're going to sail a protest fleet up there. But, you know, as far as we're concerned, it's the West which provides most of the momentum to the arms race. We're not apologising for the Soviet Union at all, but we figure that the West is leading, and so we've got to tackle it first. And also the West is more responsive to public opinion, so we'd expect to achieve something there first. And if we can get any kind of toning down of the arms race on the Western side, well, then we can point the finger at the Russians and say, right, now it's your turn.
Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Jack.
Morning.
I sure like the way your guests are doing things. We need more people like your guests on this morning. I'd just like to make a comment about the caller before your break, saying that everybody has the right to test their nuclear weapons. Like, we all live on this world, and I have a 5-year-old and a son on the way, and we're still getting nuclear fallout from the 1940s in this area, all over the world, and I don't think anybody has the right to test nuclear weapons anywhere.
Fair enough. Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, man.
Can't hear you.
Good morning.
That's better.
Yeah, I'd just like to also make a comment about that caller who phoned before the break, and just mention that I feel that this guy's probably seen Rambo one too many times.
He was a Rambo fan.
He sounded insane to me. I mean, what kind of a world does he want for his children?
Maybe he doesn't want one. I agree with you entirely. It was a stupid call. Go ahead, please.
Yes, good morning. Welcome to Vancouver, our nuclear-free weapons zone. The caller that called before, I think he's a little off base when he says that these people don't have a right to protest. One of the reasons that I protest strongly in Canada against nuclear weapons is because we have no choice of the buttons pushed anyway. I don't think Mr. Reagan's going to phone Mr. Mulroney and ask for permission to shoot the button if he thinks it's appropriate. Thanks for coming. Keep up the good work.
One of Mr. Mulroney's PMO staff will take the message, forget to transcribe it, and then Mulroney won't have got the message.
That's probably true. That's why it's so scary.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Shouldn't make jokes about it, but we've had a bit of a caper lately with messages not getting to the Prime Minister. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Jack. I'm calling. I know these gentlemen are against nuclear weapons.
Right? What happened? That call disappeared. We didn't cut it off. Not guilty.
This program, which is to prevent nuclear weapons and that from being used.
I'm sorry. Start again because there was a confusion there.
Oh, okay. I am calling to find out what the views are of the people here against about the Star Wars program and that are used to knock nuclear weapons and that down before they are used on different countries.
Star Wars. We have agreed, our government with its magnificent decision has said we're not going to participate in the American Star Wars business as a government, but any Canadian business that wants to do business with the Star Wars companies, if it can get it, can go ahead. It's free enterprise at its best.
Yeah. Well, I think we're still sorting out our attitude to Star Wars. It looks to be very, very dangerous, but it also looks to be such a crazy sort of scheme that I can't see it ever working out. I think, you know, the other allies of the United States are also taking a very careful second look at this, and most of the European allies don't wish to touch it either. So hopefully we've only got to give a you know, the finishing blow to that. I think it's, you know, it's scary if it goes ahead. But I'm sure that the scheme is so crazy that everybody's going to see how crazy it is very soon, and they'll knock that one down.
Well, my thanks to Roman Bedor from Balao and to Owen Wilkes. And they're speaking Thursday night at Glengarry College, Saturday, that's tomorrow night, Saturday at Nanush Bay in the evening, Victoria and St Andrews Halls in the evening on Wednesday, October 16th. Best of luck.
Very good. Thank
I'd
you.
like to see the whole world a nuclear-free zone.
Thank you.
Next, we're going to get down to, not the Toronto Blue Jays, the prospects of big league baseball in Vancouver, after the break. What I know about baseball, you could put on the head of you could wrap around a Titleist. And for you, those of you who don't know what a Titleist is, I'm not going to tell you. But I do know that for 1,000 years, I have heard the clamor in Vancouver for big league baseball. And I am fully convinced that our magnificent 60,000 seat stadium was erected almost principally for baseball. Yesterday, Peter Uberrott, who's a baseball commissioner, set down new guidelines for those who might get a franchise. And I've got two distinguished gentlemen here. I've got Harry Renaud, Vice President BC Place and General Manager of the stadium. And I've got Jack Beach of MOLSON''S, Molson's, who is a Vice President of the Canadians. Now, let's go just at it. It's quite obvious from the new guidelines by Peter Uberrott, I've been well rehearsed in this, that there's no way we can get Major League Baseball in Vancouver now.
There have been some very demanding conditions set down by the Commissioner for both Vancouver and any other potential Major League city. In Vancouver's case, it seems to me the biggest hurdle that has to be leaped is identification of a prominent local individual to lead the ownership group. There are some additional conditions in terms of stadium facilities, in terms of market support. All of those I think we can attend to. But
before I throw in a crack, though, Uberrott has said you must have one prominent businessman worth at least $100 million with a large ownership chunk of any applicant for a franchise.
That is correct.
Well, there's only one name that comes to mind right away, and it'll be speculated on by everybody. Jimmy Patterson, where are you when we need you for baseball? Now, that's only a joke. But it's a serious condition, isn't it?
Absolutely. Very
Does it
serious.
mean that Molson's, up to now, you have headed the campaign, have you not? For the,
Yes, we have.
And you must have put a lot of money into it.
Yes, and a lot of time.
And you're very disappointed this morning.
Yes, I'm disappointed, surprised as much as anything else, I suppose. We had been expecting that corporate ownership was really what was preferred by Major League Baseball. Now, evidently, that is not, in fact, what they expect.
I don't understand. I mean, what do I know about it? But it would seem to me that solid corporate financial ownership would be better than a $100 million millionaire ownership, wouldn't you? Why do you think Uberrott has done this?
I can only imagine that he is wanting to prevent any repeat performances of some of the other existing clubs or existing cities. He is wanting to be able to look at one person as being the individual responsible for the success, failure of an operation. There's no doubt in my mind that he would certainly expect that individual to have some healthy corporate supporters of the venture. But at the same time, he is wanting to be able to look at one individual.
We'll look at the other hurdles in a moment, but next to Harry. Harry, I always took a great interest in the construction of the stadium, but are we getting, is it possible to run the stadium without Major League Baseball and make it the thriving, vibrant moneymaker that we all hope it will be?
Well, I think, Jack, it is possible in the long term to do that. It would make it much more difficult, needless to say. The stadium was designed with Major League Baseball in mind, very definitely, and we have built Major League Baseball into our long-range forecasting for our budgeting purposes. But we haven't given up hope at this point. I think we have to keep an optimistic attitude about this. If we don't have baseball, don't have Major League Baseball in the stadium, it means we won't have those guaranteed 81 days a year. And we'd have to replace some of those days with other activities, and that just makes the job more difficult.
How many days a year do we have now where the stadium is busy, either in preparation or with these motocross? Or...
Right. In the fiscal period that we're in now, that will end in March, 86, we will have had 187 days where the stadium was rented, and the objective is to get to 200.
187 days. That's more than I would have thought. I hadn't realized that. That includes days for preparation, does it, as well?
That's the days where people are paying rent to use the stadium, whether it's a move-in or a day when the public can use it or a move-out. But you see, a lot of the events, Jack, at the stadium aren't publicized. They're not. It's mostly the sporting attractions or the entertainment pieces that get advertised. But a lot of the trade and consumer shows that we do aren't necessarily newsworthy events and consequently don't get reported as stadium activities.
Harry Renaud says we can limp by without the baseball, but if we have the 81 baseball days each and every year, your 5-year projection, you might even be able to pay back some of the debt on the building.
And we might be able to relax a little bit, that's right.
Because you can't pay back any debt now, are you covering your operating costs?
The mandate of management in the stadium is to cover our operating costs. We're not responsible to repay debt.
But you are covering your operating costs?
Yes, we are.
Now, other conditions. What else is wrong with the stadium under UBROT's guidelines?
Well, the guidelines include a preference, I emphasize, for a natural grass stadium, which means outdoors. My interpretation of that is it isn't a critical item because it would tend to disqualify a large number of existing cities. I do believe that that preference can be dealt with. BC Place Stadium is a superb place to play baseball, in fact.
But they obviously can't put in real turf there. It's going to have to be artificial turf till the end of time.
Well, there's no question about that, Jack. And I think one has to remember that when you're looking at these guidelines, you've got to look at the point that Major League Baseball puts those out and they're selling. So they're putting their optimum conditions out as guidelines. Most of the Major League ballparks today are on artificial turf. And I think in the cases where you have multi-purpose facilities, there's room in those guidelines to play an artificial turf. The ideal situation, the only thing that Mr. Ubroth hasn't put into those guidelines is, in his idealism, is to have an outdoor stadium with natural grass and guaranteed sunshine. But that's not in there. So, you know, he's in a negotiating position. And I think
that's a very shrewd point.
A lot of things to offer him.
Because he can't get an outdoor stadium with natural grass and guaranteed sunshine.
Not any place that I know of.
Yeah, and certainly only certain times of the year in other places that we know of.
That's correct.
What about the fact that he prefers privately owned stadiums as against publicly owned stadiums?
There would appear to be a contradiction in the guidelines there. Again, these guidelines are to be viewed as preferences. He goes on about preferring private ownership, but then immediately goes into setting the ideal lease terms as well.
I'm going to take your calls on this too. I've got a couple more questions I want to ask about baseball. Because I think, has it been successful in Seattle? Who was that, the Mariners?
No, it hasn't been successful in Seattle. And there's a whole list of reasons why baseball, depending on how you want to look at success, bottom line success, no, it hasn't. The baseball team has meant an awful lot to the community, however. And I think some value has to be placed on that.
Because the soccer went down the tube here quickly enough, didn't it?
But not for lack of fan support, Jack. It was really some difficulties that the league itself encountered.
How many dates do you have in the Football League?
The league plays 2 preseason games, 8 regular season games, and this year we hope to have the BC Lions in a playoff game, so we'll have 11 games.
Yeah, and is it ideal for football?
Yes, it's ideal for
yes. I saw the Celtic game down there, and there was only about 3,000 people there, soccer, and I hated the way the ball bounced.
Soccer players love it, Jack. They don't like playing on some artificial turf, but you know, one of the things about our turf was it was tested. At the time, we had the professional sports teams practice on that. The Lions, at the time, we had the Whitecaps, and we had players from the Vancouver Canadians Baseball Club. The players like the turf. There's no question about that.
Some questions from me, questions from you. We're going to ask you if you're going to support. I don't know. We'll ask you something after the break. To Jack Beach of Molson's. How much money have you poured down this pit so far?
I would think that the 8 years of the pursuit totals a cost probably approaching $2 million, some of which has been ours, some of which has been the predecessor owners of the Vancouver Canadians.
Look, there's another condition. Is it not a fact that to get this franchise, you've got to pledge so many seats and so many tickets and so much up front for so many years? What is it?
Again, there is a stated preference in the guidelines that there be 10,000 full seasons tickets sold for each of the first 5 years.
Is that ridiculous?
No, it's not. We've done a considerable amount of research, as you can imagine, and we've found that the existing sports teams in town, the Lions, the Canucks, and the Whitecaps in their day, have been able to perform at that level. Baseball does offer 81 dates, and if you use a rough price of $10 a game, that's an $800 commitment. So it is not entirely unrealistic. The market side of the argument we can deal with, I do believe.
No problem. But Washington, D.C. has already sold 10,000 season tickets for a team that doesn't exist.
They have sold pledges, as a matter of fact. Those are not full commitments. The money has been deposited in trust with a guarantee that it will be refunded and all those things. But yeah, there is a clear indication that that community has rallied and are using that way to demonstrate that they want it.
Harry Renaud took a gamble 13 years ago when he absolutely knew less than I did about baseball. Tell me the story.
Well, Jack, that was back in '68 when the Expos were in Expansion City at that time when the National League expanded, and they were looking for a financial officer, and I was about to make a career change and was asked to join the baseball team. And as a Montrealer then, I thought that would be a crazy move. Baseball would never be successful in Montreal. I knew very little about baseball. There were too many teams, and I had to wait till the World Series came along to narrow it down to 2 teams so I could keep track of it. But nevertheless, I persisted, and John McHale came to me and said, look, I know something about baseball, but I don't know anything about running a business in this town. I need somebody local. So I joined the club and stayed 13 years, when in fact I was only intending to stay for a couple of years.
And do you think the same could happen here?
Absolutely. I think that one has to take a positive approach to this thing. It's easy to recite all the negatives about why not, but I don't think enough time is being spent on the benefits that baseball brings to a city. I know it's a bottom line serious problem, but there's more to the bottom line than what baseball does for it. It creates an integral part of the fabric of a city. It brings a lot of people together.
Fair enough. Do you have to buy this franchise?
Yes, there would be a price tag not yet announced on a franchise, and in addition to that, of course, there's the acquisition of all the player contracts and the setting up of a minor league structure.
$100 million?
Well, no, it wouldn't be a total cost of $100 million. That is the kind of net worth, again, that the commissioner says he wants to see.
But I mean, if you're going to have to buy the franchise and contract the players, it's going to cost many, 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 many millions.
Oh, indeed it would. And my own estimate of the cost would be somewhere between $30 and $50 million.
Do you want to ask anybody a particular question? I mean, we could ask them if they would pledge ahead. I don't know. We'll see what happens. Go ahead to Messrs. Beach and Renaud.
Yes, I'm just curious why we couldn't form our own major league in Canada. It'd be kind of difficult with Toronto being in the American League and Montreal in the National, but as long as we paid the players the money, we would get the caliber of ball.
You mean import Americans?
Definitely.
Okay, is that a question that makes any sense, gentlemen?
My own reaction to it is the major leagues already exist, and that is really what the baseball fans really expect to see.
You don't want to see a 2-bit Canadian league?
I think not.
How do you agree?
I agree with that.
Thank you, sir. Goodbye. Go ahead, please.
Morning.
Morning.
Do you think that Major League owners have seen how successful the Blue Jays and the Expos have been, both on the field and at the gate, that they're a little bit afraid of the World Series coming to Canada and that they don't want another Canadian team in the league? And that's why they're putting on all these conditions. I'll listen.
I don't think that's the reason for the conditions. It seems to me that Toronto is an excellent demonstration of an operation that can succeed outside the good old USA.
It would have been incredible this year, as I'm told, if the Expos and the Blue Jays had
Well, I don't, it's like
tussled for the World Series.
When the Russians beat us at hockey, I don't think that the National Hockey League suffered because of that. If anything, I think hockey is on its way to improving itself because of the challenge.
Don't mention the Canucks in this program, please. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I was wondering if it is possible for Vancouver to just go out, become aggressive, purchase one of the losing teams like Pittsburgh, Cleveland, San Francisco, Seattle. You've got an established team, you've got all the minor league networks, you've got the players, and you're light years ahead of having an expansion team. I'll let you comment on that.
Again, I would say that to have an acquisition approved by the major league owners, which is a requirement, they would be looking for, again, the prominent local individual who is going to lead the operation. And it becomes an economic decision between...
This is the biggest sticker in Uberot's guidelines, isn't it?
No.
In other words, Molson's couldn't, under the present, Molson's couldn't be the dominant partner.
That is correct. That is my interpretation.
And that must be totally unsatisfactory from your business point of view.
Well, we don't really need to be the majority owner. We certainly want to have an interest in it because we have had a long-standing commitment to it.
Go ahead, please. No, don't go ahead. Hold on. More calls after the break. Okay, we're going to get a big league baseball team one year, maybe. Next call was 9. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Jack, you're doing a heck of a job, I got to tell you. But I'd like to put my question to Mr. Beach there, that Molson has all the capability and all the funds to get a grassroots project going on baseball. I mean, get the people involved. That's where Mr. Uberoth might, respond if the people of Vancouver or of, the Lower Mainland prove that they wanted Major League Baseball here. And I'd like to hear his response on that.
Well, you're right. Molson's has been providing the leadership over the last couple of years, and the community does need some vehicles to demonstrate its support. We have offered some of these in the past in the form of now 2 Major League Exhibition Series. We've had the Vancouver Canadians in operation in Vancouver for 8 years. We are planning yet some more Major League Exhibition games next spring. And for the individual fan, the person on the street, the best way of their showing their support is to go to the ball game.
You're not going to go for 10,000 people putting up pledges in advance or anything. It's kind of pointless, isn't it?
It's a very difficult sell, Jack.
Who was it tried to do that and failed? Was it the Whitecaps? Somebody tried.
There was a movement in support of professional basketball, I believe, in Vancouver before my time.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, I have 2 questions, really. One for Mr. Renaud. He mentioned that the stadium has been rented for 187 days.
Right. That's correct.
And I was wondering, he said some of these events are not really well publicized. Does that mean that the rental is cheaper for a trade and convention show than it is for a major league sporting event?
It's based on a different rate structure. When you're talking about what we call flat shows or trade and consumer shows, we're renting space. We're renting square area. When we're doing reserved seat events, whether it's sports or rock concerts or thrill shows, we're taking a percentage of the gate. So generally speaking, your reserved seat activity generates more revenue than a flat show will.
Seems logical. Any other question?
Yeah, my second question is the ticket pricing structure for baseball. Will they try and keep it the way it is in the United States, where it really is a family sport and a whole family can afford to go for, say, like $25? You could go, your wife, you, and 2 kids. Whereas you try and go and see football or hockey in this town, and it costs $20 for 1 ticket.
Yeah, it seems to me that the top price for a Major League Baseball ticket throughout the league is now about $11. And our feasibility work tells us that those kinds of prices can be sustained in Vancouver.
Thank you, sir. Go ahead, please.
Yes, good morning, Jack. Most of my questions have probably already been answered here, except I just wanted to express fan support and that I'm certainly interested in supporting a team if we can get one.
Appreciate those calls.
Go ahead, please.
Hello?
Yes.
I was wondering if they're a little ambitious and the baseball would be competing with hockey and other sports for customers. Why couldn't they go into partnership if they want baseball income with Seattle and have let Seattle have 41 games and we could have 40 and they could pay the expenses?
That's an interesting idea that has come up a couple of times. Again, it seems to me that real fan support depends upon the fan being able to look at a team as being his and not shared with someone else.
I'm inclined to agree with you on that. Mind you, I'm prepared the Canucks to play half their games in Seattle. Go ahead, please.
Good morning.
Morning.
My question is to Mr. Beach.
Do you honestly think that this area has the population to support a Major League Baseball team?
Yeah, it's not size of the population that is the critical factor. It's how that population behaves. We've looked at about a dozen different existing Major League cities, some of which are larger and some of which are smaller than Vancouver. And there really isn't any connection between attendance and population size.
There has to be some connection. I mean, your Major League Baseball teams have got the best attendance of the largest populated cities.
Not exactly correct. Until a couple of years ago, the New York Mets were averaging about 5,000 fans a game. It takes a good deal more than simply large numbers of people.
Well, of course it does. It takes a good team as well. And how long does it take you? Do you think it's going to take you to put a good team on the field?
Well, the Blue Jays are a pretty good example. From a standing start, 8 years later, are contending for a World Series position.
All right, and they're averaging 29,000 fans a game.
Yes, in a...
and they're losing money.
Okay, that takes us to another argument. The investment in a Major League Baseball team is not made for the purpose of direct return on investment.
It's made to sell beer, in other words.
Well, it can be done for a variety of reasons, and obviously promoting our products is one of the reasons we're interested.
Do you feel that you can sustain major corporate losses to keep that going then?
No, and that's why we don't care to be the sole owner.
I see. Well, I honestly think that you don't have the population in this area to support a team. I hate to say that, and I think you're throwing good money after bad. I really do. But best of luck in your endeavors anyway.
Thank
you. You were going to say, Harry?
Well, I was just going to add something to the Toronto situation. The stadium that the Blue Jays are playing in has a limited capacity for a team that's played so well all year long, and so they haven't been able to capitalize on that, where they would have had 10 or 15 or 20 other games this year where they could have easily put 55,000 people in that stadium. And so the capacity of the stadium in Toronto is only 40 or 41,000 people.
What's our capacity for baseball?
53,005.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, I'm just wondering, I was watching the game last night. I'm getting the impression through the media that Denver is pretty close to getting a franchise. And listening to Tony Kupek and Bob Costas talking, they were saying, oh yeah, they were down for a holiday in June and it was snowing down there. We got a dome. Why can't we get one before them?
The first condition is that there be an ownership group assembled in Vancouver led by a prominent, wealthy individual.
That's the tough one. And look at the state of our economy today. I know some really wealthy firms in this town or people in this town who are feeling it very tough nowadays.
Absolutely.
You have to be an oil millionaire from the Gulf to have 100 million spare.
Absolutely.
You don't have to be up his 100 million. Just got to be a man of that kind of net worth.
Man of means.
They've got to lose a lot of money, though, through postponement of games and...
Down in Denver, yeah. But not here. Go ahead from Vancouver Island.
Yeah, good morning, Jack. I'd like to ask Mr. Renaud and Mr. Beach as to how could a prominent, wealthy individual afford a baseball team, given the average baseball player's salary is $350,000. And for instance, in the case of Toronto Blue Jays, who were very successful at the gate this year, they had an attendance of almost 2.5 million people. But Bats, who owns the Blue Jays, is willing to lose a couple $1 million, but I guess they figure in return they get various advertising for their corporate image. But how is this prominent, wealthy individual supposed to be able to afford losses like that, even assuming excellent attendance all year?
Well, that prominent individual presumably would have some other businesses that could benefit from the position of ownership.
That's a tough condition. I can see that's the one that sticks in your craw. More calls, great calls they are too. Thank God you're coming to my rescue after the break. Been a great program this morning on baseball with Jack Beach and Harry Renaud. And I know I'm an expert on it now. I don't know what an error is, but I'm an expert on baseball. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I'd like to ask Mr. Beach what if he says he doesn't want to take the whole team responsibilities on his own and would like majority owner, wouldn't Jim Pattison be a likely candidate?
Well, Jimmy Pattison would have to speak for himself, but on our behalf, it would appear that in the commissioner's eyes, we would not be an acceptable ownership leader.
Why not?
Well, he has stated that he wants individual ownership rather than corporate ownership, and that must mean that it is someone like Jimmy Pattison that would satisfy him.
And they actually say this individual, we're not talking about thousands, we're talking about one, must have a willingness to make that sum available to the operation of a major league team.
Jack, I think if I could add something here with all due respect to come to the support of Molson's. Baseball's success in its history has been dealing at the grassroots level with the families. The Galbraiths, the O'Malleys in San Francisco, Horace Stoneham. You had the Carpenters, you've got the Bronfmans in Montreal, you've got the Websters in Toronto. It's always been the people who are pillars of the community in the cities where they own the teams. And I go so far as to say George Steinbrenner in New York as well. The reason baseball doesn't like to have corporate ownership is because they're worried that corporations can make corporate decisions disrespecting or disregarding the community that it's involved in. And that makes baseball very nervous. I'm not saying that's what Molson's problems are, but their historical success has been dealing with the families. That's why they want somebody from the community in the cities that they're going to go into. It's very important for them to be able to deal with those
But in those other cities, don't they have corporate interests too?
Oh, sure. They're not saying that corporate interest is not permitted. They're saying that the leaders
the
of
controlling
the
interest.
That's correct.
The controlling interest
Yes.
has got to be the guy with $100 million to invest.
Right.
Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Hello.
Yes.
Yes. This is a two-part. First part is not really a question, but an observation that the sports media in Vancouver is not baseball-oriented. This time of year, September, October, they jump on the bandwagon, but during the normal course of the season, it's almost impossible to follow baseball. And I'm wondering how the people visiting.
Okay, what do you think of the sports coverage of baseball? Where's what's his name? Bernie. Bernie. Go on.
Well, starting 2 years ago, both daily newspapers began to carry box scores. I think that the support of the media, in fact, is improving. And sure, they're right to be critical. That is one of their roles in society. But let's be realistic. There is not a Major League Baseball team in Vancouver that the local journalists can rally around.
Canadians have done very well this year.
Absolutely.
Got fairly good coverage.
We had an outstanding year from a number of points of view, and that shows that the media will come to the task.
Okay, bye. Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Morning.
Morning.
I'd just like to voice my support for a Major League team also.
Thank you.
I'm not real optimistic about it like a few other callers. With the success of the Canadians this year, and I have lots of friends, we go down probably 2-3 times a year to watch the Mariners. The only reason that the Canadians did enjoy more success up here was that every time you get interested in the club, players are going up or they're going down to AA or up to the big leagues. I think if we got a team here, you would find a fair bit of support with a proper marketing approach.
Yeah,
there's no doubt that the fans do have to identify with the players.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, I used to have season tickets for the San Francisco Giants, living in San Francisco when they moved from New York. I don't think Major League Baseball will be a success here, especially if it's going to be an expansion team, for the simple reason it takes many years of losing seasons before you have a winner. And I don't think the Vancouver population would, they'd probably support it for the first couple of years. After that, the attendance would drop down. I don't think it would be a success. I don't think they have the population base here to support it.
There's a cheery one for you, Harry.
I wonder if the gentleman would like to place that question in Toronto today.
Go ahead, please.
Hello, Jack.
Yes.
And your guest. Down with the negatives. My son-in-law comes down from Edmonton every now and again, and we're off to Seattle like a shot to watch the Mariners. We love the game. Now, where do I send my money for a season ticket?
Where does he send?
Go.
Hey, see that? You don't want money for season tickets. You're not going into that caper at the moment.
Not yet.
Well, if you do, come on and we'll plug it for you. Go ahead, please.
Hi. I'd love to see a baseball team here in Vancouver. But if we can't get one,
Let's start working on an NFL franchise. We'll be the first city in Canada to have that.
Harry, do you want
Well,
an
I
NFL
think I should
franchise?
respond to that question. I don't think that's ever going to happen, sir. The NFL are very happy with the CFL and the arrangement that they have. The NFL have no plans to expand into Canada. The commissioner has stated that. The CFL is well aware of their problems, and the new commissioner, Doug Mitchell, is well underway to getting their problems resolved, and I don't think you're going to see NFL in Canada.
One last short comment from this caller. Go ahead.
I wanted to find out what the role of the Vancouver Canadians will be in the new expansion team in Vancouver, whether we're going to buy them off the Milwaukee Brewers. And second, I wanted to find out if we could persuade one of the Molson brothers to move into Vancouver to become our prominent owner.
Regarding the Vancouver Canadians, the franchise is owned by Molson's, and the players are supplied to us by the Milwaukee Brewers.
And what about one of the Molsons moving in and becoming a prominent owner?
Well, again, there aren't any members of the Molson family that would qualify under the commissioner's guidelines.
I suppose not. Well, I want to say a sincere thank you to the callers and to you, Harry Renaud, this morning from BC Place, and to you, Jack Beach, from Molson's. I'm sorry Ray was out of town. We could have had him too. But that was good. Next, Sophia Loren, after the break. Not for me to name drop in any way, shape or form, but a couple of weeks ago there I am sitting up Shirley MacLaine. And now old Webster, who normally interviews politicians, suspected criminals, people in public life, I am now in the presence of one of the most glamorous...
Peasant.
One of the most glamorous peasants in the whole wide world. It is, of course, Sophia Loren. Sophia or Sophia?
Sophia.
Sophia Loren.
Yes.
And I never thought I'd see you behind a perfume counter.
What do you mean?
Behind the perfume counter.
That's not my profession.
No, but I saw
I'm
you.
an actress. I hope you have seen me more on the screen than behind the counter.
I'll never forget seeing you in Two Women.
Mm-hmm.
That's a long time ago.
Well, I was 25 when I did that film, yes.
And
but after that, I did a picture that I love very much, like Marriage Italian Style, and then Yesterday, Today and Tomorrow, and then a picture that I adore immensely. I don't know if you've seen it. It was called A Special Day, which I didn't do it a long time ago.
No, but I do remember very clearly and enjoying very much Boy and a Dolphin.
Oh.
You didn't like Boy and a Dolphin?
Yeah, that's prehistoric. Boy and a Dolphin.
Well, it's me, Sophia, who's showing the age, and not you, let me say that.
Thank you.
But, you know, I was kind of summarizing your book, and I thought to myself, what will I describe her? How will I describe her? Describe her as a poor little girl from a very, very poor family, born on the wrong side of the blanket. You know what I mean by that?
No.
Illegitimate.
Elaborate on that.
The wrong
That's what they say all the time. Elaborate on that.
On the wrong side of the blanket means illegitimate, to use the old-fashioned word. And look at you now. What was it that did it for you? Your own determination? You didn't have much of a chance at your start, did you?
No, not really. But I think that I was pushed a great deal by my mother because I started in this business when I was 15 years old, and we really were going through a very hard period. I mean, we were starving, so we didn't have anything to eat. And when I reached 15 and I was starting to blossom, as they say, I told my mother, why don't we try? Why don't you let me work, let me do something, because I wanted to help. So she had been an actress on the theater for a long time, and she's a pianist, and so I've always been living through an artistic atmosphere. So my mother said, the only thing you can do, maybe it's to become an actress. And I said, my God, I mean, to become an actress, I'm so shy, what am I going to do? She says, I'll be there, I'll always be there beside you, and we'll see what we can do. So, first of all, we went to Naples because there was a beauty contest going on, and I won the second prize. But by this it means that I won a wallpaper that I could put on the wall. It's still there because, you know, our house had been bombed, so the house was going to look very pretty. And then they gave us some money to buy a ticket for Rome, because, I mean, if you want to be an actress, you have to go to Rome. At that time, you had to. So we went to Rome, and that's how I started, and in this jungle, because it was really a jungle, not knowing anybody. I was trying to reach for my father, and I could never find him. And so, little by little, we started to meet people, and I started in films for the first time in Quo Vadis as an extra in Quo Vadis. And we made a little bit of money to be able to survive for the next month or two. And then, little by little, we met more people, and I was starting to be known because they said I was a beautiful girl, so the photographers, they got very interested in me, and they started to take pictures of me, and I was on the cover of every magazine in Italy, even though I hadn't done one film. And then, by all this publicity that I got, a producer called me and he said, "You are Neapolitan." And I said, "Yes." "You know how to swim?" I said, "Of course, like a champion." We have a film that we are going to do in Africa, which is called Africa Under the Sea. And I think you fit the part perfectly. You don't have much to do. Just be beautiful and be there, you know, it's nice. So I said, okay. So he signed me, and the first day of shooting, the first thing I had to do was to jump from a very high boat down deep in the sea. In the beginning, I was a little bit hesitant because I said, my God, what's going to happen to me? But then I said, you know, everybody floats. Maybe I'm going to float too. I don't know. I have to try. So I jumped in, and it was very hard for me to go up. So they realized right away that I didn't know how to swim. So many people jumped in, and then they just put me on the boat again, and they said, "I'm going to fire you," the director said, "because you don't know how to swim." I said, I know, I tried. And I wanted to get a job. I was very truthful to him. Yeah. I wanted to get a job so badly that I told that I could swim, but if you just give me a chance, just give me a week, you know, and I will do it. So he said, okay. So I did.
16?
I was 16, yeah.
16, 17?
16 and a half, yeah.
Tell me about your mother, though. I remember one remark in your book, which is very good indeed, because when you finally got married to Carlo Ponto, you phoned her, and what did she say? She wasn't pleased.
Who told you that?
Your book said you got married, but not in white and not in church.
Well, because my mother, she never got married, you know, and she's...
Was she the one?
She has a little complex about it.
She sounds very nice. Was she did she win the Greta Garbo lookalike contest?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, you know, you've led a terribly public life, and every time one looks around, one sees you in headlines. Do you regret any of the headlines you got?
I don't read much of the papers because I think that the papers, they have to sell them, so they just say anything without too much inquiring sometimes. And so I don't get upset anymore if I read something about me that it's not really true.
But I suppose it can be said of you that in your own way, while you were never strident about it, you were always one of the pioneers of the liberated women.
Well, in a way I was, yes, yes.
But you never joined any...
I was emancipated already when I was 15.
That's the point. But you didn't join any of the campaigns to shout about abortion or birth control or whatnot, or did you?
No, I didn't. I never do that.
Mm-hmm. And now you're living in Switzerland.
Yes.
Can I mention Carlo Ponti and Cary Grant?
What's the connection?
Well, it's a fascinating story which women follow, how you were in the dilemma of which man you'd marry.
I was 22 years old, and Cary had always been my favorite actor since I was a little girl in Pozzuoli, you know. And when I made the first film with him, I was really fascinated by his personality. And so at a certain moment, I really thought that I was in love. But then when you have to make a choice in life, a serious one, not just...
casual.
Yeah. I think you always come up, I think, with the right choice.
How's your life now?
Happy.
Good. You've
Very
got two
nice.
two sons, is it?
Yeah, 2 sons.
Live in
Switzerland.
Switzerland? But you don't live in Italy anymore. You're a French citizen now.
Well, I've been a French citizen since I got married with Carlo, because at that time there was no divorce in Italy. So I've been a French citizen for about a long time.
And you're nice.
And I'm resident in Switzerland.
Well, I wish you well with your perfume.
Thank you very much.
Is that all we've got? We better get something else.